Hello, this is your Cyber Resilience Questions Answered, the series where we answer your questions about cybersecurity. I'm Daniel. I'm a cybersecurity engineer and educator, and I'm joined by Kirstie. Hi, Kirstie.
Hello, I'm Kirstie. I've been helping people with their cybersecurity for the past 5 years, and I've been helping people understand what the latest scams and threats are and how to protect themselves online.
So, Kirstie, we have been sent a bunch of questions from workers in Scotland. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at these questions and then we're going to answer them in these videos. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in a future episode, you can leave it in the comments, but you can also send it to us via our form, and the form will be linked to in the description underneath the video. Lots of you have been asking about password managers, so we're going to answer a few questions that are about kind of the logistics of using a password manager and what happens, if something maybe goes wrong with the company that's running it. The first question that I thought we could answer, Kirstie, is when would you use something like 1Password or another password manager over the ones that are already built into your phone? So let's maybe compare like 1Password to iCloud Keychain, for example.
Okay. Obviously, this is one of my favourite subjects is password managers because it's so important to keep all of your passwords different for all your different logins. And essentially, the password manager will help you store and securely all your different logins for your websites and help you create unique passwords across your different platforms. So I think some of the key differences between like your 1Password manager or the ones that are sort of built in is basically the variety of platforms and devices that you can use them on. Apple Keychain is really good for basic password management, and that might be good and sufficient for you to use it. So with the Apple Keychain, it's limited to Apple devices, whereas other password managers, they are able to use a wider range of platforms or devices, including Windows or Android or iOS. But if you're looking for a bit more variety across different platforms, if you use a Windows and an iPhone, then you might want to use one of the other sort of password manager systems instead.
Yeah, so like, for example, I use a paid-for password manager because I have an Android phone, a work Mac computer, a personal Windows computer, and there's also an iPad in here. So all the platforms, so the built-in ones aren't compatible across everything, and I want to have my passwords synchronized so that if I update the password in one place, well, I've got the correct, most recent version of that password on all my devices. So that's why I pay. Whereas there's some people in my family that use just like Chrome on their laptop, and they've got an Android phone. So the Google Password Manager that's built into both of them is fine. It's a good option. They don't need these extra features. So I think it really comes down to the mixture of devices that you'd be using the password manager on. I think we've had a couple more questions on password managers. Kirstie, would you like to choose a question to tackle next?
Yeah, let's go for this one. So say the password manager, 1Password. What happens if that goes out of business? Do I then lose all of the passwords? What happens to my information? I think that's an interesting one.
It is. It's a good thing to think about, because if you are trusting your passwords to a third-party company, so you've got to trust that they are going to be kept safe, right? So what happens if they go bust? What happens if their systems go down? Well, the good news is actually the password file that any of these paid-for managers use is stored locally. So there will still be a version on your computer that you can still unlock and you can access your passwords. However, if the company goes out of business, well, you're not going to be able to synchronize them between your different devices. You're going to start finding features stop working. So what you probably would have to do is you need to export your data and then put it into a different password manager. So I know that I can export my passwords as a spreadsheet or as a database file from my password manager. Generally, it's quite easy to move from one password manager to the other because you can export and import your passwords. So
I would hope that they would also let you know in advance that that's going to be the case to give you
to
export your data and move it across. But as Daniel says, it is quite easy to move that across.
I've got an interesting question here, Kirstie. So this person is asking, would you recommend an open source password manager like Bitwarden, for example. That's an example of an open source one. So, Kirstie, what does it mean to be open source? And is that a good or a bad thing when it comes to password managers?
So an open source manager, it means that anybody can look up how it's been built and made. So the code is basically visible for anybody to see and also scrutinize. Some of the benefits of an open source one is usually that these managers are free to use. So you don't have to pay any licensing fees and it's all freely available, which can be a great starting point for a lot of people to use. But there are some ways to it. They aren't usually as flashy or user friendly compared to other ones that you would pay a fee for because they're not maintained by a well-funded company. But yeah, so those are the sort of kind of main differences. I would still recommend using a password manager. It's always better to have one than not. Did you use an open source one before, Daniel?
I have actually. I've used a couple of open source ones. I've used Bitwarden as my personal manager and it was all right. It had loads of features. It synchronized across all my devices. In fact, the features are pretty much the same as 1Password, which I now pay for. But the difference was that when there was bugs in Bitwarden, they sometimes got in the way just a bit too often. Like I updated my phone and then it took a couple of weeks before the autofill worked. So I had to keep going into the app and copying and pasting passwords and it was just a bit annoying. But if you aren't sure that you want to commit to paying for a password manager, or you just want to try one out, then open source, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's not a less secure way. In fact, some people would argue it's more secure because you can actually, people can go and scrutinize the code base that it's been built. It's not just a black box that you're putting your passwords into. But yeah, there are positives and there are some negatives. But like Kirstie, you're saying, I think the key advice we have is use a password manager.
Yeah.
Find the way that works for you.
Yeah. Do a bit of research. Give them a go as well. A lot of them have although the open source ones are free, some of the licensed ones have free trials as well. So we're giving them both a go, see what one works best for you.
So another topic we've been getting lots of questions on recently is two-factor authentication or two-step verification. I think because there's been some news recently about companies changing the way that they do things. So there's been a bit more interest. But let's stick with the questions that we've got in our list. The first question here is, what's the better option to get my two-factor codes? Is it a text message or is it a generator?
Okay. So I'll start with maybe describing just a little bit about what two-step verification, two-factor authentication is. So essentially, it's an extra layer of security that you can use to protect your online account. So when you log onto a website, it normally asks for your username and your password, and then it will ask for some additional piece of information. It's normally a 6-digit code. And this is where we're kind of going into that discussion of where is it best to get this 6-digit code sent to, because sometimes it gets sent via email, sometimes it's through a text message or SMS message, and then sometimes it's through an authenticator app. So I think getting your code via a generator app is much better than your text message via SMS message, because you have more control of it this way. And there has been some cases where, this way of getting your text message and code being sent to you can be exploited. So cyber criminals can do a thing called SIM swapping, or they'll get your SIM card on your phone cancelled and reissued to them. And this is more risky, and it's a bit of a time-intensive process for cyber criminals to do. But if it's possible, then they're going to try and get that so that they can then steal that 6-digit code from your phone. And there are ways that they do it as well, where scammers on the phone will maybe pretend to call you, pretending to be from that website, and say you just need to get your verification code sent through, and it all been sent through to you via text message. And then they get you to kind of read out that text message. So normally the SMS message version isn't quite as secure as your general app version. So if you can use an authenticator app, I know that someone like password managers will generate them for you, or there's specific authenticator apps that you can get to create you these codes locally instead. So Daniel, is that something that you use? Do you use the Authenticator app version? Is that how you get your codes?
Yeah, do you know what? I have a mixture. Some things I've set up in the app and some things I haven't changed to the app yet and I've still set to text message. Having text message 2FA is like way better than not having any at all, and having like an app is slightly better than text message. So if you're using text message, that's still much better than doing nothing. So don't worry, it's not like you're inherently vulnerable. Like Kirstie was saying, it is like a risky and time-intensive process to get your SIM, because they've got to call up the mobile network and like pretend to be you, cancel the SIM card, convince them that you've moved house, and then get them to post out a new SIM card to their address. There's quite a lot of steps involved to get this, like to basically get control of your phone number. However, it is technically possible. So that's why people recommend that you should use an app to do it. But yeah, there's lots of different apps you can get. Microsoft makes one, Google makes one. There's a popular one called Authy. Your password manager probably supports it too. So yeah, two-factor is still one of the best things you can do to make your account more secure. Text messages are great. An Authenticator app is slightly better.
A lot of two-factor authentication is not turned on by default, so it's good to kind of look in your security settings for a lot of apps. So you need to go into your settings and switch that on, because it's not switched on by default. But it's certainly worth having that turned on for all of your accounts where possible. So maybe spend some nights checking your different accounts. And if it's got that option available, turn it on, because it means that even if your password was released or breached in a data breach, for example, then cyber criminals still can't get access to your account, because although they've got your password, you're still not able to get that 6-digit codes to let them get in. So it's certainly a thing that we highly recommend turning on.
Great. Thanks, Kirstie. So we got one more question about two-factor. This is quite a good one. What happens if I lose my phone? What do you do then?
That's a good point. And this is probably something that you need to prepare for, I guess. So if you're someone that might lose your phone or it gets lost or something like that, this is something that you can do in advance to protect yourself against this happening. So a lot of some of the online accounts will not only allow you to set up your two-step verification method, but they also allow you to print off some offline backup codes. So these are sort of codes that will only work once, that allows you to kind of get in even if you don't have access to that two-step method. They give you a block of like 10 or maybe 20 different codes. And the idea is that you can print these off, keep them secure, and if you have used them, you just cross it off to say that you have already used it, because it won't work again. So it's maybe important to go through, check that out. Certainly things like your Google account allow you to sort of print off backup codes. Twitter also allows you to print off some backup codes as well. So that's a good thing to think about and keep them secured and offline, I guess, as well.
Good advice.
So we were talking a little bit about Twitter earlier and how they're making some changes. And one of the things that they've changed recently is for people to become a verified member, where they've got that sort of blue tick beside their name. But how can people tell, I guess, if accounts on Twitter are now who they say they are? Because everybody can go through that verified process. What are some tips there do you have, Daniel, for keeping people secure?
Yeah, it's much more difficult to now tell whether an account is from like the person or the organization that it's sort of claiming to be, because yeah, like you say, Kirstie, anyone can pay $8 a month and get a blue tick next to them. And it's not just Twitter. Instagram and Facebook are also introducing paid for verification ticks. So in the past, to get that blue tick, you had to go through a process to prove who you were and to prove that you were the person that matched up with that account. So like, Kirstie, you have a verified tick, right?
I do, yeah.
They probably contacted you and you probably had to give them some evidence that you were who you said you were.
I had to give them my license. Like, I had to prove like my photo ID, basically, to make sure that it was me.
Just to contrast that, on the company Twitter account, we decided to pay for Twitter Blue and see how easy it was to get it. We just had to like make the payment and then give it a phone number and then give it a code that was texted. And then the blue tick was there. So the bar has dropped considerably to get one of these blue ticks. Say you were looking for like the official HMRC Twitter account because you can get support via Twitter. Well, you could maybe go on the HMRC website and then look at which Twitter account do they mention on their official website and then look for that on Twitter rather than just searching Twitter for HMRC and trying to like pick the genuine one on the list. Go straight to them and get it that way.
Yeah, I think that would have been my advice as well, checking on the official website that you know. Is that companies, see if they've mentioned their Twitter anywhere, see if they've got any links to it, then you know that is the real possible one. But obviously take everything with caution on social media because there can be people that will pretend to be other companies. So again, be aware of clicking on any links or looking at the information that they're sharing. Is it legitimate? Does it seem to be true? Are they misleading you in some sort of way? Are they causing you to feel or react in some sort of emotional response? Then just take everything with a wee bit more time to verify that it is them.
Kirstie, we are out of time for this video, but we will be back. We will answer more questions in future in the next episode. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask, then send it in using the form underneath this video in the description. If you leave your email address, we'll even email you to let you know that your question has been answered. So if you've got a security feature or tool or question or a myth that you need busted, then Kirstie and I are here to answer your questions in a future episode. Kirstie, thank you again for joining me on the panel.
No problem at all, Daniel. Thanks for having me here. I enjoy kind of hearing what the sort of questions are that everybody has. So yeah, as Daniel said, send us in your requests and we'll try our best to answer them. But really enjoy this series. Thanks for having me on.
Great. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye.